Sensational. Moldova has slapped Putin in the face. Russian forces have been defeated. The party of Moldovan President Sandu is triumphant. Shock. The capture of Odessa through Transnistria, Putin's fake or a real threat? The European course. The unyielding Kremlin is losing the battle for the region. I'll tell you all the details in just a moment. Hello, this is Ukraine Today. I'm Victoria Panchenko, and here are the latest events. Russia is losing its grip. Europe has held on to Moldova. The parliamentary elections in Moldova have become one of the key events of the autumn in the region. According to the vote count, the pro-presidential party Action and Solidarity, PAS, received over 50% of the votes and secured 55 out of 101 seats in parliament, which is already a majority. The main competitor of PAS, the patriotic Electoral bloc, a pro-Russian force, gained about 24% of the votes and took second place, securing more than 20 seats. This means that the president and the party will be able to unilaterally appoint the cabinet of ministers and continue to determine the course Moldova takes. Russia was unable to destabilize Moldova. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky congratulated Sandu on the victory of the Action and Solidarity Party in the parliamentary elections.
The idea of Europe of normal and stable national development won in the elections. Russia's subversive influence will not spread further into Europe. And I spoke with Maya Sandu this morning. I congratulated her. Russia was unable to destabilize Moldova even after spending enormous resources on subversion and bribing everyone they could. It is important that this electoral victory happened without division. Ukraine was absolutely right in this.
The elections in Moldova themselves took place in the spirit of Kremlin games. Pro-Russian forces tried to discredit the electoral process. Both politicians and experts have repeatedly stated this. In particular, political analyst Andriy Andrievsky reported that provocations, bomb threat calls, and the spread of fake videos allegedly showing election fraud have intensified in Moldova. The fake videos were filmed with the participation of people who are not citizens of Moldova in order to create the impression of widespread violations and discredit the democratic process. Moreover, Andrievsky added that last week, security services detained individuals who had been trained in Serbia to organize forceful actions. The election campaign in Moldova did not go without provocations and Kremlin pressure. The country's President Sandu shocked the world. Putin is preparing an offensive on Odessa. Transnistria is becoming a new springboard for breakthroughs into Ukraine. Unthinkable things are happening there: provocations, bribery, and chaos. The Kremlin is destroying Moldova and striking at Europe. This is Moscow's most dangerous plan. Watch now for all the details.
By disrupting the elections, Russia is trying to seize power in Moldova and overthrow the government, after which Moldova could be used as a springboard for an attack on Ukraine. And with such a video addressed to the nation, President Maya Sandu spoke out.
If Russia gains control over Moldova, the consequences will be immediate and will threaten both our country and the entire region. Freedom of movement could come to an end, and our land could become a springboard for infiltration into the Odessa region. The Transnistrian region will be destabilized.
Moreover, it is precisely Transnistria that poses a particular danger today, experts believe.
Let me remind you, Moldova shares a 1,222-kilometer border with Ukraine. Moldova is a larger country, but important in terms of infrastructure. Projects connect us with Ukraine, so the stakes are high.
There, traditionally, the population has the most pro-Russian sentiments, and it is clear that the Moldovan authorities have not done enough work with them all these years.
Politicians have called on Maya Sandu to take control of Transnistria. This pro-Russian enclave is a huge problem today, not only for her country, but for the entire European continent. Of course, it's not solely her responsibility, but the main role in this matter truly belongs to her. If she had initiated the appropriate processes and changed the agenda regarding Transnistria, she would have far fewer problems today.
They decided to take action only at the final stage. Less than a week before the parliamentary elections in Moldova, they began identifying and detaining possible participants in the unrest that the Kremlin is already preparing for election day. This
is connected to the forceful protests being prepared after the elections, As before, the criminal world is part of this overall system of Soviet-style thieves in law. With the significant and dedicated help of these individuals, the various structures were actively preparing for substantial and forceful protests, both inside the confines of the prisons and also extensively on the outside. Today, the police forces, working closely together with the special services and security information agencies, meticulously carried out comprehensive measures to effectively prevent the planned action.
Thus, during searches on September 22nd in Moldova, 74 people were detained who are suspected of undergoing training in Serbia to organize rallies and protests. In particular, they were taught abroad how to handle firearms and special equipment. For this, participants received about 400 euros. Law enforcement officials claim that Russian special services are behind the operation, and the suspects are connected both to Moldovan political parties and to criminal groups. At the same time, the investigation itself has been ongoing since July of this year. But the use of force is only part of the Kremlin's tactics, having practiced in Romania. In Moldova, they also decided to use mass involvement in elections through social media.
That is, they deliberately recorded an absolutely insane number of short videos for TikTok, YouTube, and Facebook. And they are still expanding in Romanian and Russian, but with Moldovan themes to specifically attract our citizens. And this is what they are betting on.
For those who are older and haven't mastered TikTok yet, there's their own program. The same Russian Orthodox Church, which has assimilated in Moldova, still pursues the same confessional goals, but ultimately serves Moscow's interests.
The Turkic people and the Turkov people, the Orthodox one, the historical one, and the Russian Federation, as if it had resettled here, and to this day expresses its gratitude in such a way through elections in Kras. And orthodoxy, and in fact orthodoxy in the Russian style, serves as a point of connection for them, a point of communication with Russia. Well, and of course Russia uses this to strengthen its political influence, as well as to increase its economic and, if possible, separatist influence in the region.
At the same time, analysts remind us that the political system of the young state is organized in such a way that the parliament has significantly broader powers, including in terms of foreign policy direction. That is why parliamentary elections are perhaps even more important than the election of the country's leader.
If we talk about regions in terms of their percentage levels, there is no clear responsibility without clarification. Because there were those who thought that if you think what I think and you think that I think, you are involved in life. Well, honestly, folks, how many times has it happened already? We had the pro-Russian Voronin in power, then he was replaced, then there was the pro-Russian Dodon, and again he was replaced. But all of that was before the illness of that very northern dictator reached such an advanced stage, when he attacks neighboring countries and sends drones over the European Union. And I think that if this time we end up in his clutches again, it won't be as easy to get out as it was last time.
Experts also believe that this week will remain tense right up until the elections, which will take place this weekend. At the same time, the authorities are urging people to stay vigilant around the clock, since this is essentially Russia's last chance to divert Moldova from European integration by relatively peaceful means.
The Kremlin lost the first phase of the hybrid war in the fall of 2024, when it tried to disrupt the referendums and the re-election after undergraduate.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism, and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine today. Join us now.
Despite the Kremlin's colossal efforts, Putin's regime did not withstand this, said a Moldovan politician and political analyst. He emphasized that Putin needs the Republic of Moldova as a springboard against Ukraine and against the European Union.
However, Putin's regime lost because the citizens of the Republic of Moldova demonstrated civic maturity.
It is noteworthy that another sensation of this year's elections in Moldova was that not 4, as predicted, but 5 political forces made it into parliament. As we have already mentioned, the pro-Russian Patriotic Bloc, which unites the Socialist, Communist and Future of Moldova parties, took second place with a result of 24.25%. Rounding out the top 3 with just over 8% is the Alternative Bloc, which calls itself pro-European, but includes politicians with a pro-Russian past. Also entering parliament with a result of 6.2% is the flamboyant Our Party, led by Renato Usati, and unexpectedly the Democracy at Home party of Vasile Kostyuk, which garnered the necessary 5.6%. Kostyuk built his campaign on TikTok videos criticizing officials. Importantly, President Maya Sandu's team will be able to form a government independently without the need to seek coalition partners. This means that the country will remain on a pro-European course, emphasizes Alexander Leonov, head of the board at the Center for Applied Political Studies, PENTA. And despite the fact that the Kremlin had a lot riding on these elections, Leonov is convinced that this is direct proof. Russia can and should be resisted.
Obviously, it can be said that Moldova remains on a pro-European course because Maya Sandu's party is now definitely known to be able to form a government on its own and therefore independently influence the country's policy. And from this point of view, we can truly congratulate not only the voters of Moldova, but also Ukrainians, since these elections were significant not only for Moldova, which is moving towards a European future, but also for Ukraine. Russia had a lot riding on these elections. Russia invested a substantial amount of its valuable resources to, first and foremost, bring Moldova back into its traditional sphere of influence. And then a rather complex and challenging situation truly arose because among the various post-Soviet countries that were diligently moving together towards the European Union, specifically Ukraine, Georgia, and Moldova, Georgia had already been effectively and quite decisively separated, and its European integration process had been completely halted. Well, if this had happened to Moldova, it would have raised a number of problems. Since Ukraine and Moldova are moving forward together, this is an internal European agreement. If Moldova were to fall out of this direction, then obviously blocking Ukraine's movement towards the European Union, especially for Hungary, would become much easier. Obviously, creating tension on Ukraine's western borders, or more precisely the southwestern borders, would not bring any additional benefits either to Ukraine or, for example, to Romania. It would only divert resources and so on and so forth. And most importantly, in my opinion, the main outcome showed that Russia can and should be resisted, that even if the methods are imperfect, democratic approaches do work, and it is indeed possible to block attempts to illegally influence elections.
Meanwhile, as Moscow tried to destabilize the situation in Moldova, Europe sharply intensified its defense preparations. EU countries began increasing their military presence near the eastern borders, viewing Russia as a direct threat. The atmosphere of tension is rising. The continent is essentially preparing for a possible large-scale confrontation. You can see all the details right now.
Europe is actively preparing for war with Russia. Most EU country leaders are convinced. The scale of today's conflict will inevitably go beyond Ukraine. After all, Putin has no intention of stopping. After Kiev, he wants to take Warsaw, Vilnius, Berlin, and Paris.
And then, Paris, Berlin, and on the ruins of Washington, we'll write our own with such modest wreaths. So that's basically the mood.
And similar statements from the Kremlin about a possible invasion of Europe are no longer considered empty talk in the West. EU countries are actively preparing for a potential, or rather, a very real invasion.
Moscow sees itself as being at war with the West in general, and that also includes NATO. They see any sign of weakness as an invitation to push further, and to test NATO's unity and determination to defend every inch of its territory.
The first to demonstrate their determination to resist the Kremlin occupiers not just with words but with action were the Baltic countries. Lithuania, Latvia and Estonia are actively preparing for a possible invasion, bringing their military units to
combat readiness and strengthening defensive lines on the border with the Russian Federation. All NATO countries that border Russia or Belarus are coming to the conclusion that, in order to deter a possible offensive, resources are needed that until recently were considered unacceptable.
Along the entire length of the border with the Russian Federation, anti-tank hedgehogs, trenches, rows of barbed wire, and so-called dragon's teeth are appearing. It may seem almost laughable, but this is the only way to counter Putin's army.
Even more unusual methods of defense are also emerging. In Lithuania, they once drained a swamp on the country's border with Belarus, and now they say the swamp needs to be refilled so that Russian tanks can't get through. And they're basically right.
Meanwhile, France is preparing not to defend itself, but to receive the wounded, many wounded. Official Paris is urgently inspecting hospitals to accommodate military personnel. The French authorities believe that a Kremlin attack on the North Atlantic Alliance could happen in just 6 months.
The French authorities have instructed medical institutions across the country to be ready for large-scale combat operations in March 2026. This is reported with such precision by the French newspaper Le Figaro. According to journalists, Paris is predicting a scenario in which the country must become a rear base capable of receiving a large number of wounded soldiers from France and even other European countries. Preparations are underway for the possible reception of up to 50,000 military personnel alone over 6 months. That is, from 100 to 250 people daily.
At the same time, the French authorities are actively preparing their air force for a possible invasion. Like most European countries, France is recruiting and urgently training more and more new volunteers.
The French community is very strong and, how should I put it, they take the challenges of the future seriously. And of course, statistics on young people. For example, many surveys are conducted according to various estimates, but the overwhelming majority, if not the majority, more than half of young people are already signing up. They are ready to serve in the military, even volunteering for this military service.
But in Germany, there are no lines of people eager to join the Bundeswehr. Local authorities admit that they are already experiencing a shortage of personnel.
We need about 50 to 60,000 more soldiers than we currently have in our standing armed forces. Of course, the question arises, will that be enough? I can only repeat, a mandatory draft into the army is not necessary for us right now, as long as we don't have the capacity. We're talking about barracks and the training of soldiers.
Against this backdrop, anxiety is growing among the population in Europe, while Estonians are anxiously awaiting new provocations in the air from Russian MiGs. Poles in Ukraine, who have already repeatedly encountered Putin's drones and Shaheds, are hastily fleeing the country. More and more. They are looking for housing abroad. According to a Western real estate agency, residents of Gdansk, Warsaw and Krakow are actively relocating, particularly to Portugal and Spain. In the latter, the number of housing applications from Poles has increased at least threefold over the past month.
Only 30% of respondents said they would like to leave Poland in the event of an attack. 70% are ready to stay. But what is the real number? Of course, we will only see that if such an invasion begins, or if shelling starts. The fact that Poles have long been buying apartments in Spain, far from a possible attack on their country, is already a well-known fact.
Meanwhile, the Polish authorities are actively investing money in their own bomb shelters. For many Polish cities, the modernization and outfitting of these shelters is almost a top priority.
The country's security agencies have ordered nearly 4,000 buildings to be inspected for suitability as shelters. The government of the Republic has also allocated 5 billion zlotys.
But the Germans, in the event of an attack from Russia, are not planning to run anywhere. They're not even in a hurry to go to municipal bomb shelters. In Germany, there has been a surge in demand for building private bunkers. And it's all because of the same fear of a Russian attack on NATO countries. Since January 2025, the number of requests for designing and building bunkers in Germany has increased by half. This was reported by the publication Bild. A particularly large number of applications for personal bunkers from Germans came after the latest provocations by Putin, and today the most popular among EU citizens are private, medium-sized bunkers with an area of 30 square meters. The cost of each of these is approximately 30 to 50,000 euros.
And what do you think about the elections in Moldova? Will the Kremlin continue trying to destabilize the situation in this region? We look forward to your comments. Stay tuned for more important updates and don't forget to hit the like button under the video. Wishing you peaceful skies above your head.